So I'm not gonna lie, the idea of there being a Bambi 2 I surprisingly found interesting. The reason? I really like the first one. I think it's a unique, important, even groundbreaking film. It's a movie that lets the art tell a lot of the story. It doesn't have to over-explain, it doesn't have to create a bad guy, it's just a little slice of life. The sequel had an interesting premise, at least from my point of view. It takes place literally after Bambi loses his mother. Yeah, spoiler alert. I think most of you know that though. Bambi's father requests that somebody else looks after him because he's going to be too busy, but the owl suggests that maybe he should raise him. Thus, the rest of the film is just watching Bambi grow up with his father, who has never been a parent before. Again, no complicated stories, no bad guys, just a little chunk of this one life. In some respects, it's exactly what I was looking for. It's kinda what I thought I would get, kinda what I was expecting, and it's well done. On the other hand though, it is a sequel being made years later to something that was really unique and always just kinda did its own thing. So the idea of trying to recreate it years later does feel a little off. It's not something you can necessarily blame the film for, it's just kind of what's inevitably gonna happen. The artistry is really good. This movie does everything in its power to recreate the look of the original Bambi, and the feel, and the pacing. And for the most part, it does a really good job. When it has to look like Calming Winter, it looks like Calming Winters. When those extreme colors have to come in with the heavy shadows that are somehow red and blue and so forth, they bring that back too, and it's really effective. The backgrounds are never too crisp either, they're just a little blurred, again like the original film. But seeing how they're using artists and technology years later, you can tell it doesn't quite feel, I don't want to say authentic, but a continuation necessarily. You're always aware they're trying to capture the magic and the originality of the first one, and that never ever leaves. It's kind of like the sequel to 2001. It's not a terrible movie, but the first one was just so incredible and just so amazing that you kinda know you're never gonna recapture it. And that lingers over the entirety of the film. But on top of that, there are some other problems too. One is there are songs of the time period thrown in and they are kind of distracting, which, again, not to act like all the songs in the original Bambi were timeless, but these really do kind of take you out of the environment. Not Tarzan bad or Return to Neverland bad, but still noticeable. The biggest problem, or maybe I should say pet peeve, is the father himself, played by Patrick Stewart. Now Patrick Stewart is a perfect choice. He sounds just like the original actor, he seems strong and firm, and yeah, this is a really good actor. But I guess the way I always imagined the father was stern and strict and didn't really laugh that much and didn't really show much vulnerability. He was the leader of the force, he couldn't show weakness, he had to be tough all the time. So I figured that would translate over into him being a parent. And while that's what they're clearly trying to do, he does show a little too much vulnerability. He plays it more like the confused parent, the fish out of water, not yuck or anything like that, but clearly he doesn't know what he's doing. And of course eventually he lets his guard down and he goes play with Bambi and has fun, and then he realizes, oh, he was supposed to be stern and strict, and yeah, it's just kinda that thing. It's not awful, it's just not how I imagined that character. There was so much more mystery and strength to him when he only said one or two things. When he first sees Bambi in the first one, just stares down at him and doesn't say a thing. That is so intimidating. I thought that was the father I was going to get. But instead we get lines like, a prince doesn't woo-hoo.
Bambi, a prince does not woo-hoo.
A prince walks tall, a prince doesn't show weakness. It's stuff you imagine the mother from Brave saying. In my opinion, it would have worked a lot better if they show Bambi as a child with his father, and the father is strict and stern and doesn't show much humanity, and then you cut to years later when he's older. Then he confronts the father about why he was so stern and strict and the effect it had on him. That seems like a time that Bambi would talk about it, but when he cracks at his father because he thinks he's being too mean and he's trying so hard to be everything he wants, it just kind of feels formulaic. And of course the father feels hurt but can't show the emotion, but then he has to see something that Bambi does that proves his worth, and you know it. But again, it's not done bad. It is still just sort of watching Bambi's life, and it's done very similar to how the first film is. A lot of playful moments, a lot of nice artistry, a lot of dark moments, but a lot of nice stuff too. Any problems I have are kinda nitpicky. For example, there's this one deer that's kind of a bully, but he's not the villain or anything, he's just kind of a jerky, fragile kid, and I think they're building up that this is the bully that then confronts him years in the future. He even says at the end, one day we'll meet up again, and I'm thinking, you didn't need to make that connection. I like that this was just a jerky deer. It's the forest, it's nature, predators, you just kinda get it. There's also a particularly messed up scene where one of the hunters in the distance uses a deer call, and it sounds like his mother.
Mother?
I didn't know whether I really liked this or found it really silly, but it is kinda disturbing and uncomfortable, but in a good way. So overall, it is good, it just can't be the first one like I feel it's trying to be. But I really give credit to the directors and artists and writers for trying to be the first one. They didn't have to, they could have just thrown some direct-to-DVD, light animation, oh, Bambi and Thumper get in trouble, and just all sorts of like that, but they do put in the good pacing, they do put in the character, they do put in the artistry, they do put in the suspenseful moments. In some respects, I didn't want to know what happened to Bambi in between those years. It's kind of like finding out what happened to Batman after his parents died. You'd kind of like it being a mystery. But we got Batman Begins that showed everything that happened, and if it's done well, it's done well. And this is kind of the same thing. If they are going to show what happens, this is not a bad version of it. I'd say if you like the first film and are a little curious to see if this is a good follow-up, you'll get an actually okay flick. You can tell a lot of effort went into trying to capture the voice of the first one, and it doesn't go unappreciated. If you like the first movie and are even the littlest bit curious about how this one is, I think you might actually like it okay. Step out into the meadow and take a look.